Should individual rights ever be sacrificed for the public good? Hi everyone. Today I'd like to discuss one of the most fundamental questions in constitutional law and political philosophy. Should individual rights ever be sacrificed for the public good? Modern democratic societies are built upon the protection of individual rights. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, privacy, and property rights are considered essential to human dignity. Constitutions exist largely to protect these rights from unnecessary government interference. From this perspective, individual rights should never be violated simply because doing so benefits the majority. Supporters of this view argue that rights lose their meaning if they can be taken away whenever it is convenient. Imagine a government restricting freedom of speech because certain opinions make society uncomfortable. Or imagine authorities searching private homes without legal warrant in the name of public safety. Although these actions might sometimes produce short-term benefits, they also create dangerous precedents. Once governments gain the power to limit fundamental rights too easily, those powers may gradually expand. History shows that many authoritarian governments began by claiming that restricting individual liberty was necessary for the public interest. However, others argue that rights cannot be absolute. Every society places limits on individual freedom. For example, freedom of speech generally does not protect direct threats of violence or fraud. Property rights do not allow someone to use their land in ways that seriously harm others. Even freedom of movement may be temporarily restricted during public emergencies such as infectious disease outbreaks. Supporters of this position argue that rights inevitably come into conflict. When one person's freedom endangers the lives or freedoms of many others, governments have a legitimate responsibility to intervene. The challenge is determining when such intervention is justified. If governments restrict rights too easily, liberty suffers. If they never restrict rights, society may become unable to protect public safety or maintain social order. In constitutional law, many courts apply the principle of proportionality. Under this principle, restrictions on fundamental rights should pursue a legitimate public purpose, be necessary to achieve that purpose, and interfere with individual rights as little as possible. This approach attempts to balance liberty and collective interests rather than treating either as absolute. In my opinion, individual rights should receive the strongest possible protection because they form the foundation of a free society. Nevertheless, in exceptional circumstances, narrowly tailored restrictions may be justified if they are clearly necessary, proportionate, and subject to independent judicial review. Ultimately, protecting both freedom and the public interest requires not simple rules but careful constitutional judgment. So here's my question for you. Do you believe individual rights should remain almost absolute, or should governments be allowed to limit them whenever doing so benefits society as a whole? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for listening. See you next time.